So there's a lot of insanity going on, not just in the control room. And it is related to this talk of the deep state. Now, look, I want to be clear about this. Is the deep state a real thing that has happened here in America in the past and that happens from time to time in different countries? Yes, what does it mean? It means a group of people working inside the government, sometimes outside the government as well, but with people from within the government to do things that were not authorized by the overall government and by our democracy. So there's an excellent case to be made that the deep state existed in the 1950s and 60s here in America and authorized things that were not otherwise authorized by our democracy. And you should read into that, and what Allen Dulles did, especially after he was fired from the CIA, was atrocious. So it's not a crazy idea in the first place. Now, are all conspiracy theories true or are they all false? Please tell me that you're smart enough to know that the answer is neither. So have some people conspired to do certain things at different times? Of course! Are all conspiracy theories true? Of course not. You really think there are lizard people running around or 80% gorilla, 80% pig hybrids? I mean, some of you do, and those of you that do are lunatics and you should be locked up in an insane asylum. Okay, so is there a deep state in America today? Look, there was the Church Commission after we found out about all the abuses in the CIA. Now, it cleaned up a lot of those abuses. Did it clean up all of them? No. If you say to me that the CIA or other intelligence agencies from time to time have overstepped their bounds, I would completely agree with you. If you say to me that there is a rogue element within the government today that is actually making secret decisions and they were looking to overthrow the president, I'd say you'd have to have amazing evidence of that. You'd have to have overwhelming evidence of that. My sense is since the Church Commission, that a lot of the intelligence agencies have turned into government bureaucracies. For better or for worse, yes, at least we got rid of the worst parts of the deep state, but we also got a bunch of bureaucrats, and it took us how many years to get bin Laden? Way too long, over a decade to get him. And it took us a huge amount of time to get the leader of ISIS, and we're not even clear or positive that we got him yet. So I think that the CIA is oftentimes riddled with bureaucracy. But to think that there is a deep state that is actively doing the things that the Republicans claim is unreal, and it would require overwhelming proof, of which they have none. And there's a range, right? It started with guys like Alex Jones saying that the deep state exists. This was in mid-2016, and that they were planning to drop a 2,000-pound bomb on the White House to kill Trump. In case you haven't heard, nobody's done that, because it doesn't exist, and that's the ravings of a lunatic mind. Just recently, he claimed that the deep state is going to nuke Washington, D.C. But since the deep state mostly lives in Washington, that would appear to be counterproductive. So now, look, if the ravings of Alex Jones, who cares? You know, pipsqueak on the internet, and yes, I guess there's a market for lunatics in America, and he has his followers. But now, we know the president has called into Alex Jones' show before. Alex Jones claims he talks to him on a semi-regular basis, but Alex Jones claims a lot of things. Okay, so let's dismiss that. But the virus has spread to actual Republicans. They're going around all over television, congressmen, senators, talking about the deep state and secret societies, etc. Now that leads us to Newt Gingrich on television yesterday. Could get a load of how the insanity has spread. Watch.
Remember, the elite media is part of the deep state. The elite media group has survived by being in collusion with the senior bureaucracy, the city of Washington, the senior reporters, the senior bureaucrats, the senior lobbyists. They all hang out together. They all talk to each other. They all compare notes.
Now the deep state is not as deep. Before it was deeply buried. It was some guys in the CIA, FBI, or whoever, and they were conspiring. Now it's so broad. Oh yeah, elite media, they're part of it too. Yeah, New York Times part of it, and they did a cabal with the CIA, and Brian Stelter went down to the FBI and said, all right, how do we cook up a plot that's part of the deep state to do a coup against President Trump or to undermine President Trump or to throw him out of office? You really believe this? Okay, look, if you say the corporate media or the establishment media, or if you're a conservative, call it the liberal media, call whatever you like. But the big cable news guys, etc., if you say that they have a bias, that's a perfectly debatable point. And I argue that they have a bias. I think that they don't have a conservative or liberal bias, they have an establishment bias. They are run by multi-billion-dollar corporations who are in favor of the status quo because they're at the top of the food chain in the status quo. They don't want to rock the boat, it's their boat. So, and the way that they do that is subtle and long. It's in who they select to be anchors and reporters, etc. That's one thing. And if you think, no, they don't have an establishment bias, they actually have a conservative bias because they're run by corporate executives who only care about the bottom line, or you think they have a liberal bias because their reporters are liberal. Okay, fine, those are not insane theories. They're perfectly fine theories that we can debate. But to think that they're part of a deep state and they're conspiring with the CIA and the FBI to overthrow the president, that's full cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. You're off the deep edge. And there's no evidence of that. That's crazy talk. Newt Gingrich used to be Speaker of the House. The virus has taken over the entire Republican body. So then I went to find a poll on this because I was like, no, come on. I know these lunatics are saying it all over Fox News, and now you got official US congressmen and senators, let alone the former Speaker of the House. But how about the actual Republican voters? Brace for impact. Look at this. Is the deep state working to overthrow Trump? To overthrow Trump? 60% of Republicans say yes. 28% not sure. 12% no. Only 12% no. 12% of Republicans think no, the deep state is not looking to do a coup against the president of the United States. But 60% you say, yeah, of course. Of course he is. One party in this country has just lost its mind. And they've gotten fed so much propaganda that they are divorced from reality completely. We're not having legitimate debates. And some would call the bias of the media an illegitimate debate. I don't agree with them. I think the bias is a really interesting debate. But to think that they're in cahoots and that all of these people are trying to do a coup against Trump and overthrow him, 60% of Republicans think that. And another 28% are like, oh, can't quite tell, could be, could not be. But then you look at the overall numbers. Now, of course, it's because of so many Republicans in the country too, and some of the independents, etc. But even for overall in America, these are for all Americans. 38% wins with not sure. 34%, over a third of the country believes there is a deep state and they're looking to overthrow Trump. And 28% say no. No is losing. For the whole country, no is losing. This is what happens when propaganda replaces facts and reality. We're in a really scary state in America where we've lost a huge chunk of the country. They're out there floating like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, just going in circles like, whoa, deep state, CIA, Brian Stelter, whatever. And like, man, I don't know how we get them back. I don't know how we start to communicate again in the same language where we agree upon certain facts and reality and then have a debate between conservatives, liberals, and moderates within the scope of reality. But it looks like about a third of the country's gone. They live in an alternate reality where there are coups against the president, there are cabals, there's conspiracies, and 80% gorilla, 80% pig, 80% human hybrids running around. There's even apparently a war on math, if you believe that. They don't believe in science, they don't believe in professors, they don't believe in reporters. Why? They were told by conservatives for decades and decades, don't believe in anyone that brings you facts. Who brings you facts? Professors, scientists, the media. They undermine them so thoroughly that about a third of the United States of America has now lost its mind. Scary times. If you become a member of the Young Turks, you'll be saying,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
So do it right now, tytnetwork.com/join. Get the whole Young Turks show every day.